Late night for Charlie. Thank you for getting up this early, Charlie. We do appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
We're great. We're just kind of talking through this loss again. And you know, one fundamental elementary question that the common fan has, whether they played high school football, they never played it down in their life, they just watched the Steeler game, it's this. They arrive at this question. Why don't the Steelers, if they have so much success in the no huddle, why don't they come out in that look from the very beginning? From an old quarterback's eyes, you answer that question for us, Charlie.
Well, see, it has to be a seasoned vet, not an old vet. You know,
seasoned vet. Yes, gotcha.
Play on words there. All good. Hey, but no, seriously, it comes down to ego, and that's essentially comes down to the coordinator, because you know how Ben Roethlisberger feels as it relates to his no huddle. But if the coordinator is not willing to do that, either the conversation is happening outside of Ben and between Tomlin and Matt Canada, or Matt Canada's decision altogether. So it's 100% on him on why they don't start the game in no huddle. But when you're on prime time, this is what happens, because if the offense works, that means Ben will get the credit, Matt Canada won't. So that's just something that you have to play, and it's been going on for years like that. Not necessarily here, but that goes on throughout the league.
Well, I was wholeheartedly behind the idea of promoting Matt Canada to offensive coordinator last offseason when it happened, Charlie, but I don't know. In my opinion, I don't think enough has been done with this offense, offensive line limitations aside. What's your opinion?
No, I totally agree. And what was once a strength around here for a long time with that offensive line is now a weakness. We all knew that coming into the season. And when you heard Ben Roethlisberger talk about, hey, there's going to be, some laws, we're going to get off the slow start. He gave us a warning back in August that this offense was a work in progress. So to get to the point now of where we are, they're only averaging about 16 points a game, or maybe at 20 at best. This is just frustrating watching it all around. But anytime you're a new coordinator, you come in, you have your eyes on everything else. You do have your say in the personnel groups that you want out there and potentially on this roster. Now, whether Tomlin agrees with that, ultimately those questions are the answer behind the scenes.
Charlie, that ego thing, and I know you say that it happens. I mean, it's involving successful people, but isn't a coach's job to put players in the best position to succeed, and that they're not supposed to care who gets the credit as long as they win? Canada says that himself. He goes, well, as long as we win, and this seems to fly in the face of that.
Yeah, we're easier said than done, right? But I think when you look back, and coaches, depending on what his overall goal is, Matt Canada may one day want to become a head coach. And guess what? When you're on national TV, you have a chance to call the plays. And if you could put 40 points on the board and embarrass somebody on the other side, people are going to say, maybe he could potentially be a top head coaching candidate, or at least maybe consider him on the list. All coaches deal with that. They know that. And it just gets to the point where it's just hard because, like you mentioned, do you put the team first in this perspective? Obviously, it's not happening, and it just becomes frustrating because as we're all sitting here watching it, we all have the same questions.
Black and Gold Uncensored, brought to you by your local Nissan dealers. Okay, then take us inside as a seasoned quarterback, if you would, Charlie. Do you see the same thing on television, or do fans just yell this? Is it then fact that when they do go no huddle in the second half, as opposed to when they're not no huddle in the first half like last night, it truly is Ben just grabbing the mic and being like, hey, I got this, step aside, I'm going to take command? Is it that simple?
Yeah, it is that simple, but people fail to realize, we could talk about who gets credit or whatnot, but these decisions are made at the beginning of the week. So whenever he's presenting a game plan together on Wednesday, you now get a whole feel, okay, here's what you're thinking wholeheartedly on why you prepared a game plan. So now I'm taking into the mind of offensive coordinator. So now when I do get the opportunity to call the plays, it's not like I'm drawing things up in the sand. All I'm doing is taking a game plan that the coordinator put together and understanding certain packages to say, when I watch film, I can now predict the defense is going to play this, and if they do, I'm going to call these plays that are now part of this week's game plan. That is what I'm talking about, not drawing stuff up in the dirt. So those are the things that, have to continue to come about. But the problem is this playbook is not as expansive as what everybody thinks. What you see is what you get, the same plays. And I've been around coordinators that they, pride themselves on not calling the same play. In this particular offense, what you see in the first quarter, you probably will see a little bit in the second. You would guarantee you see it in the third. So they're not mixing it up. So they have a package, and they probably have about 3 or 4 plays off that you're running on a consistent basis. And that's why this offense seems stagnant. That's why I made a comment a couple weeks ago as it relates to talking to players around the league, former players, staff, coaches. All of those guys say this is one of the easiest offenses to defend against because there's no complexity to it.
Former Steelers quarterback Charlie Batch with us every Friday at 9 here on the Fan Morning Show. And that wasn't even the worst side of the ball last night, Charlie. I mean, the defense has become what amounts to a laughingstock. How does that happen when you've got Cam Hayward, T.J. Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick? How has this defense reached this point?
Because you have stars, but they're not playing together as a team because the rest of the pieces either aren't buying into it or they're just doing their own thing. And that just becomes frustrating. When I look at Dalvin Cook and everybody's like, oh, he's not playing this week, and then all of a sudden we get the 11th hour, he's like, oh, I'm playing. Why? Because he realized, there's some good eating out here. This run defense stinks. I have a chance to now get 150-plus yards. Well, I was wrong. He had 200, and he was on pace at one point to break the all-time rushing record in a game at 296 set by Adrian Peterson. So Dalvin knew that there were some holes in his defense, and, man, when you can run 20, 30 yards before you're even untouched, that lets you know there are issues. And when you look at what's going on at this team, these players better, number one, understand you're not only playing for this season, you are being evaluated for next year. So however this whole thing unfolds, you better put your best performance out there because, man, there's going to be some major changes happening on both sides of the ball.
He would have broke that record, Charlie. He got tired from running straight ahead, wide open 40-yard dashes, though, with nobody touching him, or he would have broke the record.
Absolutely. In that third quarter, they took the foot off the gas. Like, okay, let's just kind of bleed the clock and let's punt the football and see if the Steelers offense can move. That's why it happened. Now, you do have the credit. Steelers defense are out there and they made plays and turned over, but that was the manner of what the Vikings approach when they came out in the second half.
Keeping in mind this is a family show, and I know you're a professional, but what were some of the things maybe that you were saying out loud as you were watching that what was supposed to be a defense where you talk about 8 guys in a box? There were like 2 guys in the photo as he's running through a crease off tackle. What are some of the things that you kind of say out loud when you're watching stuff like that?
I'm looking at certain packages that they're using on the field. You had people misaligning on the one Dalvin Cook run. You had everybody to the right. There was nobody to the left. Like, really? Like, how does that happen in the professional level? So I think they're trying to be too cute on the defensive side from a schematic standpoint, a coverage standpoint, and they're leaving themselves susceptible to what we saw last night. So it just becomes frustrated because they're trying to make plays, but they're trying to figure out they're going out of their way, but not necessarily playing within the defensive scheme that's called on that particular play.
All right, if both coordinators, there's trouble with both coordinators, then at what point does Mike Tomlin or Art II become accountable that those were the people who were identified to be hired, especially Canada, whenever he's sort of fallen up in the coaching world? Does some of this fall on to Tomlin and some of this fall on to Art?
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to start off with Tomlin. I mean, you could say Art, but Art's not the one putting game plans and those things together. So, yes, Mike Tomlin would ultimately, take accountability for that. But when you have your coordinators, that's who you're able to now offset and say, okay, we're going to share the workload in those particular perspectives. So when those things aren't working, yes, you could turn around and say, I'm accepted. But, they internally, they know what the issues are. We just don't hear all of them.
Charlie, they got to win at least 3 of their last 4, you would think, to have a shot at making a playoff spot. Is that realistic at this point, given what they're staring down?
It is. And I mean, 9 wins, maybe 10 for sure gets them in. So I'd look to say all 4 of these games matter, and they have to win it. That kind of reminds me of 2005 when we were sitting there and everybody wrote us off. Not to say that this is a Super Bowl winning team or potential team. All I'm saying is it cleared the picture for us and at that point because we had to win all 4 just to get into the playoffs. And then everything else unfolded, we were going to take it from there. They're in that same similar approach. Everything's right there. If they want to get into the playoffs, it's at stake. But just same reason that we knew it was at stake at the beginning of this Minnesota game, they came out and laid an egg. So which team are we going to get against the Titans?
Charlie, you know what's going to happen, right? That somehow, some way, they're going to finish 8-1.
It wouldn't surprise me, and then we'll all be talking about a non-losing record again. But the thing is this: this is where just from the expectation levels that the fans now have. Prior to that, Steelers fans were spoiled. They expected to win the division. They expect a home playoff game. Better yet, they expect the AFC Championship game and be in the Super Bowl and win it. Those were the expectations. Now we're to a point we're saying, non-losing season? We're okay. Or maybe just a division title. Maybe we're okay with slipping into the playoffs and losing in the first round. That works in other cities, but that's not the expectations that were happening around here. That's why the standard was created, because of the expectation levels that we have around here. Right now, it's not being met. I'm frustrated. Everyone else is frustrated. It just gets to the point of where we are mediocre. That's where we are. And if anybody asks you and they say, where are you with Steelers Nation? We're just average because that's what our record says and has shown that for a long time right now.
Well, let me ask you one more thing before we let you go. There are 4 games left in the regular season. No matter how they turn out, wins and losses. Let's say that Ben goes out and he lights the world on fire in those last 4 games. And again, it doesn't matter how they end from a team standpoint. He plays like he played in the second half last night. Do you think that he's definitely done, though, no matter what happens?
See, that's why I said it's to be determined because it's not Ben's issues, and everybody's quick to blame the quarterback. Yes, quarterback always gets the blame, talked about when it's good, but when it's not, he gets all the blame.
How would you know that at all, Charlie?
Exactly, but that's just what happens. But ultimately, when you look at where Ben is at, man, Ben is making throws. Look at the throw at the end of the game to win it in triple coverage. Those are the things that Ben has, but they just don't have the talent on this roster. This will be, to your point, if you turn around at the end of the season and Ben says, I want to come back, this will be the first time, maybe second because he probably inclination this year, but this will be the first time in his career we can honestly come back and say, I'm not part of a Super Bowl caliber team. I don't know how he responds to that. I don't know if he feels to say, I don't have the pieces around me to now hopefully win a Super Bowl because that's where he's at in his stage. I just don't know it. And I think ultimately if he wants to play, I just don't know if it continues to happen here. If it does, they better make an overhaul in the offseason and do something unprecedented under Kevin Colbert that they've never done, which means spend tons of money in free agency and not building through the draft in the manner that they've done.
Charlie, you're a good man. You're a good Pittsburgh. I can feel the passion in your voice this morning. It's really something. I think you echo the thoughts of not just people who played for the Steelers like you did, but just people who root for them. Thank you, Charlie. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, fellas.
Absolutely.